Welcome students to your English literature session for class 8th. The chapter which we are going to study today is chapter number 16 from the book Reader, and the name of the chapter is Pygmalion. Now let's see the introduction of the chapter. Pygmalion is a play written by George Bernard Shaw. It is a story about a young girl, how her life transforms, and that leads to the change in her personality. The plot of the story Pygmalion concerns a bet made by Henry Higgins, a professor of phonetics, that he can train this girl, Eliza Doolittle, from a very rough and cockney accent and make her change her personality in such a way that she may be able to adjust with the royal and the high society. Let's see the matter of the play. Now, we all have studied this chapter in detail during the online session. In this clip, I would be telling you about the actual summary of the story so that you may be able to understand the actual gist of the story and what is the story all about. Now, what happens in the story in an event on the side of a street, Eliza Doolittle, a flower girl with a severe cockney accent, trying to get Edwardian London when she encounters Henry Higgins. Now, this flower girl, Eliza Higgins, used to sell flowers on the streets. Now, at one day, a rainy day, she encounters Henry Higgins, a famous expert on accents, also a very famous personality of the city, who immediately disgusted by Eliza's voice. Now, this Henry Higgins was a person who could understand people and their accents and from where they belonged. Now, during this conversation going on the streets, Henry Higgins coincidentally bumps into Colonel Pickering. Now, Colonel Pickering was another very famous personality at that time. An amateur student of Indian languages, Pickering and Henry excitedly introduced themselves to one another because they wanted to meet each other from a long time. And Higgins invites Pickering to stay with him during his time in London. Now, during all this conversation was going on, they introduced themselves to each other, and everybody else was there. And Eliza was, in a way, disgusted and insulted in the crowd. Now, one day what happens was Eliza tries to improve her personality, and she finds out that a person is there in the city who can train her. Now, one day she moves to find that person. When she goes to the person's house, she sees that the person is none other than Henry himself, whom she had met before. In his cruel and mocking lessons with Eliza, Henry eventually teaches her proper speech. Now, there was a little bit of a hot discussion between them while Eliza went to his house for the training, but then when she realized that he was the same person who had insulted her before, she started to argue, and even Henry was continuously disrespecting and insulting her. At that time, they made a bet. Henry and Colonel Pickering, they bet that if Henry would be able to train Eliza in a limited period of time, and Eliza would be able to introduce herself at the famous embassy party ball with no one the wiser to her common roots, and if nobody would be able to recognize her, then Henry would win the bet. Henry takes her to his mother's house at the escort races. Unfortunately, Eliza relapses. Now, what is happening over here in the whole story, that at this point of time, in the middle of the story, Professor Higgins, is continuously training Eliza by insulting her, and also during those insults telling her important points how to change her personality. He does not only teaches her how to talk and how to behave, but also how to dress. And eventually, Eliza gathers a little bit of improvement. However, Eliza's slang disappears in the days leading up to the embassy ball. Now, one fine day, when Professor Higgins thinks that he has trained Eliza quite well, but actually the time was not over. Even Colonel Pickering suggests Professor Higgins not to take her to the party at this point of time because she was not so much trained. But Professor Higgins think that he has trained her enough, and this is the final time when he can test her. Okay, he takes her to the final embassy ball party, and Henry passes her off as a perfect lady, befooling the language expert. Now, what happens in the party? Eliza enters the party and she introduces herself to everybody, and everybody was astonished to see her royal appearance, her beauty, and all the men and women were mesmerized by her beauty and by her personality. She is among the most charming ladies at the ball and is proclaimed to be so refined as to be of originally royal blood, and everybody thinks that she's from a royal family, royal blood. Now, at last, when everybody decides that Eliza could be from a royal family, a little bit of people were there who had a little doubt, but it was okay because most of the majority of the people, they thought that Eliza was from a royal family and from a royal blood, and that made Professor Higgins win the bet. It is a very diverse story which tells us about learning and changing yourself and your personality, and how if you determine yourself and if you have confidence in yourself, you can not only change yourself but you can change the world. Notes will be there after this session. Thank you and have a nice day.